Senku is better than your favorite shonen protagonist. I'm sorry, but that's just facts. I mean, I'm not really sorry because Senku's just way better, but I get that you're probably not on board with this if you've never even read Dr. Stone before. To be fair, there are a bunch of great shonen protagonists like Naruto, Ichigo, Luffy, and plenty of other characters. But scientifically speaking, and you know we're keeping it strictly scientific up in here, Senku is a much better protagonist than all of them. That's why in this video I'm going to explain why Senku is the best protagonist in shonen. Just know that I'm not covering every single character I can think of, so make sure to comment with your favorite MC down below. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment comes from Black Panther, who pushed the always too forgotten Yo agenda. If you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. So before we get into the specifics, let's just make sure we're on the same page about shonen protagonists. Cause the last thing I want to do is make a 10 or 11 minute video and in the first minute, someone comments, "But bro, Goku will low diff Senku," or "Dude, Light Yagami is way smarter." Alright, I don't want to hear none of that. Now, what it means to be a protagonist is really straightforward. The protagonist is the main, or in most cases, leading character of a story. So, generally speaking, they should have some qualities that make them fit as a leader. On top of that, since shonen is an area that's meathead friendly, what it means to be a shonen protagonist is also pretty straightforward. There's no one definition since shonen isn't a genre and it includes a lot of different stories, but there's obviously some common traits. Typically, they're young, optimistic characters with a clear dream or goal. An obvious example of this would be Naruto. But when they don't have a clear dream, then the plot becomes more of a coming-of-age story focused on the character's identity. This would include someone like Ichigo, who never really has a big dream like being the pirate, ninja, wizard, whatever king, so the story focuses more on his identity and how it changes over time. But that's pretty much it. Which brings us to Senku. And Senku is really the best of everything, so let's just go through the list and see how he fits in. Young character? Duh. I know he's a talking leak, but he still is a teenage leak. Clear goal? Well, considering he was building rockets when I was still trying to figure out the action replay for my DS, I think Senku is pretty goal-oriented. Plus, he says all the time how he wants to revive the planet, so Senku's goal even now is painfully obvious. But is he optimistic? Well, he's always presenting the idea that there's a scientific solution for just about any problem the characters are faced with, so that also seems pretty obvious. Okay, so he fits the description. But what makes him better than your favorite shonen protagonist? Well, let's start with a character that everyone would recognize as one of the greats, Naruto. And there's a reason you were copying the jutsu hand signs and the way he runs back in middle school. Or more recently even. It's because Naruto is one of the most inspirational characters in manga. I don't know about you, but I didn't have that many friends when I was younger, and I certainly wasn't a star athlete. So watching someone like me continue to work towards an insane goal through hard work really made me feel like I could do whatever I wanted as long as I put in the time and effort. But here's where I explain how Senku does it better. Like Naruto, Senku champions the idea of achieving goals through hard work. He just puts a little spin on it and calls it diligence. But that's no accident. In a past interview, which I'll link down below, series creator Riichiro Inagaki was asked about his inspiration for the series. In response, Inagaki said he wanted to make a character that was steadfast and got better and better step by step. So in a sense, Senku is a lot like Naruto because they're both optimistic. But Inagaki also brings attention to the iconic scene where Senku counts each and every second for 3,700 years because he literally can't do anything else. And that's the key difference. Senku's diligence isn't just about surpassing your limits. In this case, Senku stays the same for thousands of years. It's about setting realistic goals, breaking them down into steps, and putting your faith in the process. So Senku's not just being his own hype man like Naruto and going off on a training arc. In fact, Senku often downplays his own abilities. Instead, Senku's style of optimism is to place his faith in science rather than his own hard work. It's a very subtle difference, but it makes Senku's brand of optimism a bit more grounded. For example, as much as hard work is important in something like weightlifting, you'll only get so far if you keep trying to do bicep curls with your shoulders. More often than not, somebody's already gone through exactly the same thing and they've passed down all the secrets you should know. So instead of just hoping that it'll all work out as long as he keeps working at it, Senku places his faith in tried and tested rules. And that actually brings us to the next protagonist I'd like to mention, Luffy. Whenever conversations of Luffy's static character come up, it's always mentioned how, instead of going through a lot of change himself, Luffy changes the world around him. And this is why Luffy is widely seen as one of the best shonen protagonists, because he has this incredible ability to inspire people and act as a natural leader. But there's one area in leadership where Luffy actually falls short. As a captain, Luffy has no problem trusting his friends with important jobs. But that's a bit different than what Senku does. Remember how I said Senku trusts in science, how he trusts in the process? Well, because he trusts it so much, he often delegates special jobs to the people around him. For example, because Senku is always so busy as the resident boy genius, he usually gives the jobs he can't do to Chrome, someone equally as excited about science but not nearly as smart. But Senku has no problem doing this because he honestly believes that once you break a fantasy down into science, anyone can do the same thing by following the right steps. And this is why Senku is actually a better leader. Luffy inspires people with his optimism and resilience. While Senku does inspire people with his love for science, he also does so by breaking things down into easy-to-understand rules and getting them to see that they can make all the same crazy inventions that he can. It's more than just, oh, I trust you because you're my friend. Senku honestly believes that anyone can do what he can. So when Senku tells someone they can make crazy technology as a matter of fact, it inspires them to believe in science like he does. Again, like with his diligence, Senku removes himself from the equation. It's not so much I trust you as it is Senku telling people they can trust in the process. And that's why Senku is able to act as a better leader than Luffy by passing on what he knows and delegating special jobs to the people who follow him. Now, with that, we've touched on the two big aspects of your typical shonen protagonists. We talked about how Senku's diligence makes him uniquely optimistic, and how his ability to delegate makes him a better leader than any other shonen protagonist. But what about characters like Ichigo, the ones where it's more about their identity and the coming-of-age story? Well, that depends. If you're of the opinion that a shonen protagonist should have a per se coming-of-age story, then someone like Ichigo is obviously the better option. He has to deal with the death of his mother at a young age. On top of that, he has to come to terms with his dad being a Shinigami and he himself being part Hollow. Obviously, that's a ton of baggage to deal with before you've even graduated high school, so naturally Ichigo is forced to decide how he views himself at a very young age. Senku, on the other hand, not so much. Senku would rather watch videos on astrophysics than think about his identity, and he's never once questioned his relationship with his adoptive father. In fact, Senku was already telling that same father to go grow up when he was only in preschool. He's an incredibly secure and mature character, so if you're looking for the kind of story where the protagonist struggles to find himself, Dr. Stone just ain't it. But even though Senku is a fairly stoic character, we still see him mature, even if only slightly, over the course of the story. For example, Senku really looked up to his father, so when he finds out that he died 3,700 years ago and never even got to say goodbye, Senku is forced to accept that his dad isn't going to be there for him anymore. Plus, since Byakuya gave his whole life up to help save the world, Senku is left with an incredible sense of responsibility as he inherits his late father's hopes and dreams. So in this sense, we do see Senku grow up a bit. To leave or say goodbye to one's parents is an inevitable part of growing up. As a result of this, Senku is left reflecting on the time he spent with Byakuya, and all the sacrifices he made for him, coming to terms with that relationship in the process and coming out of it an even more mature character. Now, obviously, this kind of character growth is subtler than someone like Ichigo, but that's just the kind of character Senku is. Not that being a genius necessarily makes you mature, but when you have the world's best dad and you already have your career picked out at age 6, then there's only so much growing up you can do. It really just comes down to the kind of shonen protagonist that you generally prefer. Is it someone like Asta who goes from a screaming kid to a slightly less loud beefcake? Someone like Gintoki, who is a literal man-child but can also be a great dad when he needs to be. Or someone like Tanjiro, who acts as the big brother of the group from day one. Like I said, shonen includes a lot of different stories, so there's really no one-size-fits-all rule for how the protagonist should change over the course of the story. So at least in this area, I wouldn't say Senku is particularly better than anyone else. But we can still use what we covered in terms of optimism and leadership because those two factors are generally present among all the different types of shonen. And like we already mentioned, Senku kills it in these two areas. He's refreshingly optimistic, and he continues to demonstrate leadership skills that set him apart from just about any main character. So, although his character arc might not be your favorite, Senku is clearly the best protagonist in all of shonen manga. And that's it for this discussion. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. Also make sure to comment down below with your thoughts. And if you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.